Hey everyone, we're back again for another bit of something to talk about. And today it's going to be about comprehension debt. So, what do I mean by that? Well, I had a realization about an aspect of AI usage, which is that it's not that the tools are bad, which might almost have been an easier thing, but rather that they can make you faster while making you worse at the part that actually matters. And I've felt this myself, and I call it sort of getting fast and dumb, and sort of feeling less thin, feeling a little spread out and less grounded, not being sure about what you're owning, what you're building, and that's sort of a scary feeling when you get it, and you don't realize it at first. It sort of creeps up on you, and over time you realize this is something that you have to newly be aware of and take care of and fix, because code and tests will work and features will move forward, but your understanding won't keep up at the same speed, and that's something you have to proactively take care of now. So this is not really one of those writes bad code type takes. We're past that point. Regardless of what some hardcore deniers think, there are always these threads where someone comes in and says, "Oh, I had a bad experience," or something that doesn't matter. Okay, that's a shallow argument. The real story or problem is that the bottleneck has shifted and code generation became cheap, and it exposed the real job, which was never really typing. So, for some people, the danger is still sort of an old-fashioned way of looking at AI as being not good enough, and still see folks getting some laughs from this. But the real sort of trap is when the code works in terms of features or tests or pull requests moving forward, etc., and no one fully owns the logic, and that's the failure mode here in that case, because previously when you had bad code, it at least looked bad, and there were books about this too. There were people catalog things like code smells, but the problem is that now code can look decent and be readable, but still be alien to because it's code that you can read but you don't sort of inhabit. And like I said, I noticed this change in myself, and I had to work on it to correct things, because I could move things forward, but instead of thinking I built this, the feeling that creeps in is more of I helped this happen or I guided this, etc. And it's okay in certain situations, and you have to judge when it's not okay. And the worst thing can be, not the sort of this is hard, but rather I'm moving quickly through something that I don't fully understand. So these, from that perspective, these tools didn't remove the bottleneck in the, let's say, this process of software development, software engineering. They moved it, and for a long time, people acted like writing code was the hard part. Like the big cost was turning intention into syntax or legal syntax, and seen that way, it can feel like the whole problem is being solved, because you have these AI tools generating so much, uh, you know, working code with all those previous problems that you had with the bad code or flaky code, failing code, etc., fixed. But that was actually not really the core job anyway, which was masked by this extra work that you had to do. And in reality, you always had to sort of decide, or someone had to decide what should exist, understand why it exists, checking whether it works the way you intended it to, and debugging it, because there are those moments when reality fights back. And so when code generation gets cheaper, you feel over time, it's very natural. You'll feel it. Some new sources of pain, which are showing going to show up in like reviewing or validating or debugging, and just general human understanding. And we kind of automated a bunch of the typing that we used to do over all this, and that used to take up a bunch of time. And as a result of automating that, your judgment is more expensive now. So, one takeaway is more generated code is not equal to more progress. It's just more to review, more to debug, more to reason about, and it's more of this large amount of, let's call it, plausible code, that's insufficiently well understood, and it's going to stay that way until something breaks. So, which is worse, because the prevailing perception is that, oh, the problem is gone, and the bottleneck that existed was gone, but as I just mentioned, it's not gone, it's just moved. So yeah, this sort of brings us to the title, which is, comprehension debt is a good way to frame this. By way of comparison, technical debt, is a more well understood term, where it lives in the code, because you took some shortcuts, you put some hacks in, etc. Right? But this new debt lives in the relationship between you, the human, and the artifacts that you create. And it's the gap between what software does and what you can still explain. Because you can have, ugly code which is well understood. It's a fact of life. It happens. It's annoying, but it's something you can work with, and it's fixable. But now, and this is the part that is new, right? You didn't have this situation before. You almost could not have this situation before. You can have clean-looking code, perfectly idiomatically written, etc., but nobody understands it, because no one has looked at it enough, and you can get into that situation, and that's scary, or it should be scary, because the debt, or this form of debt, is not in the repo anymore. It's sort of in your mental model. Right? It's a missing piece of your mental model, and these the AI tools that we all rely on in our work now are very capable of creating this debt, and they're almost designed for it, because they produce structure on demand without transferring ownership, because that's something only some human can do, to sort of load it into their wetware. And so if you're not careful, every commit can potentially arrive as legacy code, which is again a new thing, because in your mental model, normally legacy code is something you associate with something that's alien, because it's old and unfamiliar. But this is new and unfamiliar, so it's different. And so you can create fresh code that feels like legacy code, instead of old code that is non-idiomatic and therefore feels like legacy code. There can be new code that is perfectly idiomatic, with all the good patterns and everything, but it still feels like legacy code because you never took the time to understand it, and you don't know why it's a certain way. That is, you have to build up this incremental understanding as you generate the code and commit it, etc. Right? If you don't build up that incremental understanding, matching it, then after a while you don't know why something happened, and that shows up because you won't be able to fix things when you need to fix things. And taking that a step further, we can scale this up from people to sort of teams or the org, and you can generate more code collectively, without building up your shared understanding of it. And the generation can far outpace the review of it, which is again something that didn't happen before because it took time and effort to create it. And so you could put in the time to review it without sort of worrying about these changes piling up. And a consequence of that being reversed is that you do end up sort of skimming changes more often because you have less time to go into depth for everything. So you need to have these multiple passes, you need to have some sort of funnel. You can't just look at everything with the same approach that you took earlier. You have to somehow almost like have a first pass where you take the summaries of each sort of change, and then you only look for depth that's in some of them. So it's all doable, but you have to consciously be aware of this so you can proactively shift your way of building up your mental model, because it won't happen by default. And you can get into this state where things are shipping and moving along, but the sense of having the architecture in your head doesn't develop. And you can't simplify things, which is a way of having the technical debt build up, right? I mean, how do you reduce technical debt in general? You simplify things. You once you get a understanding of the whole picture, you can compose it better. But if you never understand the whole picture, that step can't happen. And well, there's another aspect to this, which is a whole other, I guess, topic that we can't get into, but I'll briefly mention, which is, how does this affect the pipeline for building future judgment? How are you learning to see the whole system? Because in the past, you would make small changes, incrementally understand things, etc., etc. If you're just generating stuff, then you never go through the process of learning everything in this sort of difficult way. It's still doable, but then you have to take a very proactive approach to it, which is, I guess, it's not common, right? Because it doesn't happen by default. So I guess we're coming to the close. Another takeaway is that the sense of understanding is therefore becoming sort of expensive or scarce, where the tools are real and useful, the leverage that they give you is real, it's huge, the productivity gains are huge. So it's not going away, no matter what anyone says about the AI bubble in a general sense. That those claims may or may not be true, but at least when it comes to core software engineering, the leverage is very real. No one is ever going back to writing stuff by hand. That's just not going to happen. Even if no progress is made at this point, enough has happened that if it just becomes more widely used, it will simply change the way everyone works, right? But because of code generation becoming cheap, the thing that has become scarce or expensive is this retained understanding, the sort of the way you encode your understanding of whatever the system, the structure of things, etc., in your head, and preserving the coherent mental model. And the important point is this used to happen by default, right? You didn't have to think about this because when you were building things, you were writing it out by hand. You had to sort of make and correct mistakes, and the act of doing this meant that your mental model naturally grew with what you were working on or building or doing, etc. But now it doesn't happen automatically, and so if you want to retain that understanding, you have to do it purposefully, because, or rather, it's up to you how to sequence the creation of your understanding. You can sort of strategically postpone it for a while, but you can't postpone it indefinitely. And the more you avoid it or postpone it, the harder it is to build it up later. So it's there is definitely a trap here where you can feel productive because if you are getting that sort of dopamine hit, or feeling rewarded when you generated something, when the artifact was created, because previously that was the right stage. A thing is created, it's deployed, that is the point of being done. And the fact that you got there meant that because you were involved in making it, doing it, etc., you naturally have had the mental model for it. But now, because your comprehension is delayed, there is this mismatch now, where the thing may feel like it's done, but you should not let yourself feel that sense of being rewarded, because you haven't. It's not done for you. You have to ensure that your mental model is also up to date. And yeah, so it can go too far, and you can reach a point where you can't explain things clearly at all. And I think this is a natural thing that anyone who uses too much of these codes will face. And then at that point, you have to figure out, what does that mean for you? How are you going to proactively sort of take steps to make sure you retain understanding at each level? Because you're obviously not going to fall back to not using things. It just means there is this new mode of working, but the new mode of working has some trade-offs which you might not have been aware of. Yeah, there's something to keep in mind, right? And so yeah, the real question is, who understands what's being built? And that's the question to ask yourself. And remember that the bottleneck is not the typing or the syntax, or the literal construction of whatever deployable artifact you were engaged in creating earlier. But the bottleneck is now you understanding the sort of the rationale behind it, and sort of the history of it, and all of that implicit knowledge that you would have retained if you had made it on your own. And there is going to be, I think, some open question about how much of that you should keep, how to speed this process up, etc. And that's something people are figuring out, and I guess we can talk more about that later. So yeah, well, if there's one thing to leave with, it is that the challenge is now to keep that sense of understanding alive without drowning in output, because the default is you'll drown in output. So yeah, that's all I had today, and we'll get into something else next time. Stay tuned.